Sebastian West had never believed in fate. In college, he believed in blueprints, in schedules, in charts, and deadlines. He believed that, if he mapped his life with precision, nothing could derail him. Yet even the most carefully designed plan could not explain how Sophia Davis had walked into his world. It was sophomore year, the autumn leaves just beginning to flare with gold and scarlet across the campus quad. Sebastian, weighed down by architectural sketches and thick textbooks, had collided with her outside the library doors. Her coffee had splashed across both of them, staining his gray sweater and her white blouse. "Great," she had muttered, flustered, patting uselessly at the mess with napkins. "My first real meeting with a client, and I look like I lost a food fight." Sebastian, usually curt with strangers, had surprised himself by laughing. "Could have been worse. I could have been holding blueprints worth 3 weeks of sleepless nights." Her eyes had flashed up then hazel, with flecks of gold that caught the light, and something shifted in him. For the first time, Sebastian felt as if the meticulous order of his world had tilted. That was the beginning. They'd studied together in the library, Sophia scribbling bright, messy notes in the margins of his neat architectural drafts. She teased him for his rigid schedules. He teased her for doodling flowers in her notebooks during lectures. Late nights turned into early mornings, fueled by bad coffee and whispered dreams. Sophia was fearless in ways Sebastian wasn't. She spoke of travel, of creating campaigns that would change how people saw the world. She believed in stories, in connecting with people's hearts. He believed in steel and glass, in structures that reached toward the sky. Somehow they balanced each other, her warmth softening his edges, his focus grounding her fire. He remembered the first time he told her he loved her. It was past midnight in his dorm room, papers scattered everywhere, rain streaking the window panes. Sophia had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up with her notebook pressed to her chest. Sebastian had been sketching, but he couldn't take his eyes off her, the way her hair spilled over the pillow, the faint smile tugging at her lips, even in sleep. "I love you," he whispered, not even realizing he'd said it aloud. Her eyes had fluttered open, and she smiled as if she had been waiting to hear those words. "I know," she murmured, shifting closer. "I love you too." Those years were golden, every memory etched into his bones, sneaking into the old campus theater to watch movies on a broken projector, holding hands under the autumn trees, Sophia cheering louder than anyone when he presented his first architectural model. She had been his anchor, his compass, the one who reminded him that life was more than steel and deadlines. But ambition was a fire that consumed him by senior year. Sebastian had an offer on the table and internship that promised connections, investors, and a path to the empire he dreamed of. The catch was brutal hours, travel across states, and no time for distractions. He told himself he could balance both, the love of his life and the career he craved. But as weeks bled into months, phone calls went unanswered, dinners were missed, and Sophia's smile grew strained. He still remembered the night it ended. Sophia had been waiting outside his studio, her coat pulled tight against the winter wind. He was late again, his arms full of blueprints. "Sebastian," she said quietly, her breath clouding in the cold, "I can't keep doing this." He had tried to argue, told her he was building something for their future, that all the sacrifices would mean something. But when she looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears, he realized she didn't want an empire. She just wanted him, and he wasn't there. She walked away that night, leaving him with silence where laughter used to be. Years later, lying awake in his penthouse, with the city sprawling beneath him, those memories still haunted him. He had built everything he once dreamed of, skyscrapers that pierced the clouds, contracts signed with world leaders, his name on magazine covers. Yet when the parties ended and the boardrooms emptied, he returned to silence. Sebastian would stand before the floor-to-ceiling windows, whiskey glass in hand, staring at the skyline he had conquered. The city glittered, alive with millions of lights. But none of it touched the hollowness in his chest. Every night was the same. He would work until exhaustion blurred his vision, trying to drown out the memories. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Sophia's smile, heard her laugh, felt her hand slipping out of his dots sometimes. He dreamed of what might have been her curled beside him on the couch, the smell of her shampoo in the air, the sound of her voice teasing him about his relentless schedules. He dreamed of children's laughter in hallways, instead of the sterile quiet of his penthouse. But dreams were cruel. He always woke to emptiness. Sebastian West had conquered the world, but without Sophia, every victory tasted like ash. The penthouse was silent, as always. Sebastian West's mornings began before dawn, not because he needed the extra hours, but because sleep rarely came. The city stretched below him, Manhattan buzzing even at 4 a.m., yet he felt disconnected from it all. His assistants managed his calendar, his chefs prepared his meals, his driver waited on call. Every detail of his life was polished, efficient, and utterly hollow. He sat at the long marble dining table, untouched breakfast cooling before him. The news flickered on a massive flat-screen reports of his latest project. The West Empire Tower, a beacon of innovation. Anchors praised his relentless vision. Investors lauded him. Sebastian muted the television. None of it mattered. He thought of Sophia more often than he admitted. Her absence threaded through the fabric of his life, like a shadow he couldn't shake. He wondered if she ever thought of him. Did she walk the streets of New York and glance at his buildings with resentment? Or had she erased him so thoroughly that even his skyscrapers were invisible? His phone buzzed with reminders calls with international partners, a lunch with the mayor, a gala in the evening. He ignored them for a moment, leaning back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Success had bought him everything: influence, wealth, the power to bend markets. But not her, not Sophia. That evening, he arrived at the gala, his armor of tailored suits and icy composure in place. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, filled with laughter, clinking glasses. The hum of deals being whispered over champagne. Sebastian moved among them like a king surveying his court, offering polite smiles, brief handshakes. But then he saw her, Sophia Davis. She was across the room, radiant in a black dress that framed her graceful figure, her hair swept back to reveal the delicate line of her neck. She wasn't the girl he had left behind. She was a woman now, polished, commanding. She stood beside a group of executives, her voice calm, her smile professional. Every inch the director of marketing she had become. Sebastian's chest tightened. The years hadn't dulled her effect on him. If anything, distance had sharpened it. He wanted to go to her, to apologize for every mistake. But before he could take a step, another man appeared at her side, Liam Turner. Sebastian recognized him from industry chatter, sharp strategist at Horizon Media, quick to climb ranks with his charm and ambition. Liam's hand lingered a little too close at the small of Sophia's back as he leaned in to speak. She laughed politely at something he said, and though the gesture seemed harmless, Sebastian's gut twisted. He had seen that hunger before. He knew the look of a man who wanted more than he admitted. Sophia excused herself from the group, her eyes brushing past Sebastian without pause. It was as if he were just another stranger in the crowd. The rejection stung, though he told himself he deserved it. Later, Sebastian found himself alone on the terrace again. The city lights spread below like fireflies. He gripped the railing, fighting the gnawing emptiness inside. You still think staring at the skyline will answer your questions. The voice was smooth, almost amused. He turned to find Liam standing a few feet away, drink in hand. His smile too casual to be genuine. Depends on the questions, Sebastian replied. His tone clipped. Liam stepped closer, eyes glinting. Sophia's done well for herself. Strong, independent, admired. She doesn't need reminders of the past. The implication was sharp, deliberate. Sebastian didn't rise to it, but inside, his jaw clenched. She deserves more than reminders, Sebastian said evenly. She deserves the truth. Liam's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly, before he raised his glass in mock salute and walked back inside. Sebastian stayed, the night wind cold against his face. He realized then that if he wanted Sophia back in his life, it wouldn't just be his ghosts he had to fight. It would be men like Liam who circled, waiting for an opening, willing to twist the knife if it meant victory, for the first time in years. Sebastian felt something stir inside him that had nothing to do with contracts or skyscrapers. Determination. He wasn't sure if Sophia would ever forgive him, but he knew one thing: he couldn't stand by and watch her slip away again. The gala stretched on, the hours marked by endless conversations Sebastian barely heard. Every polite handshake, every toast raised to his empire, every word of praise felt hollow. His thoughts circled one name, one face: Sophia. When the evening finally wound down, Sebastian returned to his penthouse. The city was alive beneath him, but the silence inside his home was deafening. He shed his suit jacket and tossed it onto a chair, loosening his tie as he poured a glass of whiskey. The amber liquid caught the light, glowing like fire. He didn't drink for celebration anymore. He drank for silence, for something to fill the void when memories grew too loud. The walls of his home were lined with photographs of skyscrapers, models of buildings, framed awards. They told the story of a man who had achieved everything he set out to do. But none of them showed what he had lost along the way. He sank into the leather armchair, staring at the skyline. For the world, those towers were monuments of his ambition. For him, they were reminders of every night he chose work over her. And tonight, seeing her again, that emptiness roared louder than ever. Sophia, meanwhile, slipped into the back seat of a cab after leaving the gala. The driver asked where she was headed, and she gave the address of her apartment without hesitation. Her voice was steady, her posture composed. To anyone watching, she was the image of a successful woman returning home after a long night. But inside, her heart was unsteady. Seeing Sebastian again had been like opening a wound she thought had long scarred. His presence had unsettled her, stirred memories she had buried beneath years of work and resolve. She hated that part of her, still reacted to him. That old fragments of warmth lingered despite all he had done. She had worked too hard to rebuild herself, to find strength and independence, to let him break her again at her apartment. She kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. The city hummed outside her window, life continuing as always. She closed her eyes, willing herself not to think of him, but images slipped through anyway. The way he once looked at her, like she was his entire world. The promises whispered in the quiet of college nights. She clenched her fists. She couldn't go back, not now, not ever. The next morning, Sophia arrived at Horizon Media's office, her professional mask firmly in place. Colleagues greeted her warmly. Her reputation was solid, her leadership respected. Liam appeared by her side with 2 coffees, handing one to her with a smile that was equal parts charm and familiarity. "Rough night?" he asked lightly. "Long night," she corrected. Taking the cup, his eyes searched her face, lingering a fraction too long. "You handled yourself perfectly. Not that I'm surprised." Sophia offered a polite smile, but she sensed the undertone in his words, the unspoken curiosity about her history with Sebastian. She didn't answer, focusing instead on the stack of reports waiting on her desk. Still, Liam didn't miss the flicker in her eyes when Sebastian's name was mentioned. In the news briefing later that morning, and Sebastian, across town, couldn't shake the image of her eyes steady, proud, and filled with a pain she refused to show. That night, Sebastian found himself pacing his penthouse. He replayed every moment of their encounter, every glance, every word. He remembered the way Sophia had looked at him once with trust, with love, and how different her gaze was now. Cold and distant. It haunted him, no matter how many blueprints he drew, no matter how many buildings he erected. He couldn't design a way to undo the past. He could only face it, and for the first time in years, Sebastian West, the man who never hesitated, who conquered markets and silenced rivals, felt utterly powerless. But beneath the despair, a seed of determination stirred. He had lost her once. He wouldn't let it end like that again. Not while there was even the faintest chance that she might still feel something. Not while the memory of her laughter still echoed in his hollow nights. The restaurant was the kind of place where deals worth millions were sealed over glasses of Bordeaux, older than the men drinking it. Crystal chandeliers glittered above velvet booths. Polished brass gleamed in the candlelight, and a string quartet played in the corner, the music soft but commanding enough to remind every patron they were paying for more than food, they were paying for prestige. Sebastian West sat at the head of the long table, reserved for his party, his presence magnetic as always. Waiters moved swiftly to ensure his wineglass was never empty, his guests hanging on every word as he spoke about the future of West Empire's latest project. He looked the part of the untouchable billionaire, tailored suit, composed expression, the cool authority of a man who had conquered everything in his path. And yet, inside, Sebastian felt the familiar hollowness pressing at his ribs. He laughed when appropriate, nodded at the right moments, but his thoughts weren't on the blueprints or contracts being discussed. They were still with her. Sophia, the memory of her rejection at the gala, haunted him sharp, final, and still, some irrational part of him refused to let it be the end. Sebastian, one of the investors said, pulling him back to the table, your vision is remarkable. Truly, you're reshaping the skyline of New York. He offered a polite smile, but the compliment barely registered. Reshaping skylines meant nothing if he couldn't mend what he had broken years ago. Then the doors of the restaurant opened, and the world seemed to tilt. She walked in. Sophia Davis. She wasn't dressed for a date or an evening of leisure. She wore the sleek uniform of a professional on duty. Fitted blazer, pencil skirt, her hair pinned back neatly. In her hand was a tablet, and her gaze was focused, sharp, as she scanned the room. She was clearly managing the press and branding arrangements for the event horizon. Media's signature touch. Sebastian's breath caught. He had thought the gala encounter was a cruel twist of fate, a once-in-a-lifetime collision. But here she was again, woven into his world in ways he couldn't escape. Sophia noticed him almost immediately. Her eyes flickered in his direction, but she didn't falter, didn't stumble. She looked through him, as if he were nothing more than another guest at the restaurant. Then she moved on, speaking to a waiter about the media setup near the wine cellar. Sebastian clenched his jaw. The indifference in her gaze cut deeper than open hostility ever could. A moment later, Liam appeared. He wasn't dressed in Horizon Media's uniform, no. Liam knew how to play the part of a guest even when he was on duty. His suit was tailored but modest, his smile easy as he crossed the room to stand beside Sophia. He leaned in, pointing something out on her tablet, his hand brushing lightly against her arm. Sebastian's knuckles tightened around the stem of his wineglass. "Sebastian," one of his companions asked, "everything all right?" "Fine," Sebastian said curtly, though his gaze never left the pair across the room. Liam said something that made Sophia laugh, though the sound was brief, professional. Still, it was enough to make Sebastian feel as though the air had been pulled from the room. He had no right to feel jealous, he knew that, but knowing didn't stop the ache in his chest. Dinner progressed, courses arriving like clockwork: foie gras, seared scallops, lamb tenderloin. Sebastian ate mechanically, his focus fractured. Every time Sophia crossed the room, his eyes followed. She was all efficiency and composure, directing staff, checking details, speaking with clients. Not once did she look his way again, but Liam did. Once, twice, their eyes met across the room. Liam's gaze held a flicker of something sharp beneath the charm. Something Sebastian recognized instantly. Challenge. Sebastian leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. He knew that look. He'd seen it in boardrooms, in hostile negotiations, in the eyes of men who thought they could take what was his. This wasn't just about business, it was about Sophia, and Sebastian West wasn't about to lose again. The evening had reached that languid stretch where the wine flowed freely, and the conversations grew louder, less restrained. Sebastian sat stiffly at the table, one hand resting on the stem of his glass, his attention half on the men discussing zoning permits, and half on the woman moving purposefully. Across the restaurant floor, Sophia had been tireless all evening, answering questions from reporters, ensuring photographers captured the right angles, managing the timing of speeches and toasts. She carried herself with a quiet authority, the kind that didn't need to demand respect because it was simply there. But to some, that authority was invisible. Sebastian, purred Clarissa Hale, a long-standing investor whose family money had cushioned her arrogance for decades, your event is exquisite. But really, don't you think these media handlers take themselves a little too seriously? Her manicured hand gestured lazily toward Sophia, who was speaking with a young assistant near the wine cellar. Clarissa's tone dripped condescension, the kind of cruelty disguised as casual observation. Sebastian's gaze hardened, though he said nothing. He watched as Sophia handed the assistant a clipboard, her posture upright, her expression calm. Pretty face, of course, Clarissa went on, leaning closer, her perfume cloying. But really, darling, some people forget their place. This is a table for visionaries, not hired help. The laughter that rippled around the table was sharp and shallow. Sebastian's hand tightened around his glass. Across the room, Sophia had clearly heard. Her shoulders stiffened, though she did not turn. She finished giving instructions to her assistant, her head held high, then moved to the Mata D's station. Not a word, not a glance of protest. She carried the insult with quiet dignity, as if it weighed nothing, but Sebastian felt its weight like a stone in his chest. Clarissa chuckled, sipping her wine. Honestly, it's almost embarrassing, these people circling around as though they belong. Don't you agree, Mr. West? The table turned expectantly toward him. Sebastian set down his glass with deliberate care. His eyes, cold and sharp, locked on Clarissa. No, I don't agree. The laughter died instantly. Clarissa blinked, startled. I beg your pardon. Sebastian leaned forward slightly, his tone steady but edged with steel. Sophia Davis is not hired help. She's the reason this evening has run without flaw. She is one of the most competent professionals I've ever worked with, and she deserves respect certainly more than cheap gossip over wine glasses. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the faint music of the quartet. Clarissa flushed, her lips parting, but no retort came. Around the table, several guests shifted uncomfortably, their gazes darting between them. Sebastian leaned back again, calm, returning to his features, though the tension in his jaw betrayed him. If respect is difficult, then perhaps silence would be better. With that, he lifted his glass and took a measured sip. Across the room, Sophia had frozen mid-step. She had not expected it, not from him. Slowly, she turned her head. Their eyes met across the glittering restaurant, and for the first time that night, her mask slipped not much, just a flicker, a softening in her gaze, quickly hidden. But it was enough. Enough to remind Sebastian of nights when she had looked at him with trust, with pride. Enough to pierce through the wall she had built between them. Sophia lowered her eyes, collected herself, and walked calmly toward the exit. She did not acknowledge the insult, nor his defense. She didn't need to. Her silence was its own kind of power, but Sebastian couldn't look away until the doors closed behind her. At another table, Liam watched everything. His smile never faltered. though inside, a spark of unease flickered. Sebastian West had stood up for Sophia not just politely, but publicly, decisively. The room had felt it, and Sophia, despite her silence, had felt it too. Liam tightened his grip on his glass. He had worked for years to position himself at Sophia's side, to be the steady presence she could rely on. But Sebastian was threatening that balance with nothing more than his presence, his authority, his ability to command a room with a single sentence. Liam sipped his drink, mind already calculating. If Sebastian thought this was simply about winning back a woman, he was mistaken. This was about power, and Liam had no intention of losing. Sebastian remained at the table, outwardly calm, inwardly restless. He had not planned to defend her. The words had erupted from somewhere deep inside, a place that had remained silent too long. But as the night wore on, he knew one thing with clarity. Sophia Davis was not gone from his life, and he would not let her walk away again. The restaurant emptied slowly, laughter fading as the last of the guests drifted out into waiting cars. Sebastian lingered longer than he should have, exchanging perfunctory farewells with investors, though his thoughts were far from business. He replayed the scene again, and again the sharp insult. The silence at the table, his own words cutting through like glass in Sophia's eyes. Just for a moment, they had softened. Just for a heartbeat, he had seen the woman he once knew beneath the steel of her composure. It was enough to ignite something in him that had been dormant too long, when he finally stepped into the back of his car. The city lights flashing past the tinted windows. Sebastian leaned his head back and closed his eyes. He had expected emptiness, the usual aftertaste of evenings like this. Instead, his mind filled with fragments. Sophia's laugh in the library, warm and unrestrained, the scent of cinnamon when she baked cookies in the dorm kitchen, her hand slipping into his during midnight walks across campus. The memories weren't precise. They came like flashes of light in the dark, sharp then gone. But they clawed at him, tugging him back to a time when ambition hadn't been the only thing driving him forward. He opened his eyes, staring at the blur of neon outside. How had he let it all slip away? Across town, Sophia stood in her apartment, staring out her own window at the same skyline. She had shed her blazer, her hair loose now, but her posture was still rigid, as if she could hold the evening's emotions at bay through sheer will. Sebastian's defense replayed in her mind, his voice steady, his gaze unwavering as he cut down Clarissa's condescension. It had been unexpected, jarring even. The Sebastian, she remembered, had been ambitious, driven, but not protective. Not like that. She shook her head, turning away from the glass. She couldn't allow herself to be swayed. One moment of decency did not erase years of silence. One public defense didn't heal the wound of abandonment, and yet, in the quiet of her apartment, she admitted to herself that it had mattered. It had mattered more than she wanted it to. Liam had texted her earlier, "You did great tonight. Don't let West rattle you." She hadn't replied, because Sebastian had rattled her, back at his penthouse. Sebastian poured a drink but didn't touch it. He paced the length of the living room, the silence oppressive. He thought of Sophia walking out of the restaurant, her head held high, refusing to bend under Clarissa's insult. That quiet strength, that dignity she had, always had it. He had admired it once, loved it even. Now it drew him in all over again, but along with the admiration came guilt, sharp and unrelenting. He had walked away from that strength once, convinced that skyscrapers and contracts were worth the sacrifice. Now, sitting in his glass fortress, he saw the truth. Every tower he had built had only made the emptiness louder. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant, something about tomorrow's schedule. He ignored it. None of it mattered. Not tonight. Tonight, only Sophia mattered. Liam meanwhile sat in his own apartment, glass of scotch in hand. The city lights reflected in his eyes, but his mind was elsewhere. He had seen it, the way Sebastian had defended Sophia, the way she had faltered, however briefly. It was dangerous. Liam had spent years positioning himself carefully, building trust, becoming indispensable in Sophia's life. He had played the patient friend, the reliable colleague, and now Sebastian threatened to unravel all of it in a single evening. He swirled the scotch, lips curling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. If Sebastian thought this would be simple, he thought Sophia could be won back with a few gallant gestures, he was wrong. Liam knew how to fight in the shadows, and he had no intention of losing. Sebastian didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window, watching dawn creep across the skyline. The city woke, lights fading as the sky turned pale, and still he sat there, restless. The fragments of memory haunted him. The feel of Sophia's hand, the sound of her laughter, the way she used to say his name when no one else was listening. They weren't ghosts anymore, they were reminders. Reminders that what they had was real, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of regret and ambition, Sebastian knew the truth. Sophia had never been a mistake. She had been the only thing that had ever truly mattered. He clenched his fists, resolve hardening. He would find a way back. Even if she resisted, even if Liam circled like a vulture, even if the world itself tried to stand in his waist, Baston West was done building towers of glass. This time, he would build something stronger. He would build his way back to her. The first headline hit on a Monday morning. West Empire under investigation for tax evasion. Sebastian's phone erupted with calls before he'd even left his penthouse. His legal team was already in a frenzy, his CFO's voice tight with panic on the line. By the time he reached the office, the story had spread like wildfire. Financial blogs, gossip sites, even mainstream outlets were picking it up, each adding their own layer of speculation. Sebastian strode through the lobby of West Empire headquarters, his expression stone. Employees avoided his gaze, whispers trailing in his wake. In the boardroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. Papers spread across the table, lawyers flipping through binders, executives demanding answers. "It's baseless," Sebastian said sharply, cutting through the noise. "Our books are clean. Every filing is in order." "That doesn't matter," one of the attorneys countered. "What matters is perception. Right now, the market believes you've been hiding assets offshore. If this continues unchecked, we'll see a nosedive in stock prices by the end of the week." Sebastian's jaw clenched. He knew how quickly a rumor could erode confidence. It didn't matter that the numbers were flawless. Public opinion was a storm that could sink even the strongest ship. Across town, Sophia sat in her office at Horizon Media, scrolling through the same headlines. Her assistant rattled off updates, major outlets requesting statements, social media hashtags trending, investors pulling out of interviews. Her stomach tightened. She knew what this meant. Within the hour, her director confirmed it. "Sophia, West Empire just retained us to handle crisis communications. You'll lead the account, effective immediately." The irony wasn't lost on her. Out of all the companies in Manhattan, out of all the crises to land on her desk, it had to be his. Sebastian. She stared at the file in her hands, the familiar ache in her chest rising. She wanted to refuse, to say someone else should handle it, but she was a professional, and Horizon's reputation was at stake. Personal history had no place here, so she squared her shoulders and began drafting a response plan. That evening, she walked into West Empire's headquarters, clipboard in hand, her expression calm. The boardroom was chaos, executives arguing, lawyers snapping. Sebastian at the head of the table like a storm contained in a man's body. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled back, his jaw tight as he scanned financial statements. When Sophia entered, the noise faltered. All eyes turned. Sebastian looked up, and for a moment, the storm stilled. "Sophia," he said, her name a quiet anchor amid the frenzy. She didn't flinch. "Mr. West," she replied, her tone crisp, professional. Horizon Media is here to manage your crisis. Let's begin. He blinked at the formality, the distance in her voice. But he nodded, gesturing for her to take the seat beside him. For the next hour, Sophia led the room with precision. She dissected the coverage, mapped out strategies, drafted statements. Her calm authority silenced arguments, her clarity cut through panic. Sebastian watched her, half in awe, half in regret. She was brilliant, sharper than he remembered, more composed. Every word, every directive carried weight. And she didn't need him. That truth stung deeper than any headline. At one point, an executive muttered, "With all due respect, Ms. Davis, what do you know about protecting billion-dollar empires?" Sophia didn't miss a beat. Crisis doesn't care about your billions. It cares about trust. And right now, the public doesn't trust this company. My job is to change that. If you'd like to keep arguing, feel free. But time is what we can't afford. Silence followed. Even Sebastian felt the shift, respect settling in the room like dust after a storm. Later, when the others dispersed, Sebastian remained. Sophia gathered her notes, avoiding his gaze. "You didn't have to take this on," he said quietly. She paused. "It's my job. I didn't expect." She cut him off, her eyes finally meeting his. They were steady, sharp. "Don't mistake this for something personal. I'm here because Horizon assigned me, nothing more." Sebastian absorbed the blow, nodding slowly. "Still," he said, his voice low, "you were extraordinary in there. For a fraction of a second." Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe even the ghost of pride. But it vanished quickly. "Good night, Mr. West." And with that, she left. The click of her heels echoing down the hallway. Sebastian sat back in his chair, the silence pressing in again. The headlines were a storm, Liam's fingerprints invisible, but undeniable. Yet beneath the chaos, one thought anchored him. Sophia had walked back into his world, and this time, he wasn't letting her go. The next morning began before dawn. Sophia was already at her desk in Horizon's temporary war room, screens glowing with graphs of social media sentiment, trending hashtags, and news coverage. The numbers were brutal. Negative perception had spiked to 68% overnight. If they didn't flip the narrative soon, West Empire could lose billions in valuation within days. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion clawing at her, when a familiar voice cut through the hum of screens. "You don't sleep, do you?" Sebastian leaned against the doorframe, a paper cup of coffee in each hand. He looked tired himself, but the raw energy in his eyes told her he hadn't given in to defeat. He walked over, placing a cup beside her laptop. "I figured you'd still be here," he said simply. Sophia hesitated, then took the cup. The gesture was small, but it caught her off guard. "Thanks." By mid-morning, they were in a conference room again, combing through documents, financial filings, media leaks. Sophia laid out a timeline on the whiteboard. The first mention appeared on a fringe blog at 11:37 p.m. last Thursday. Within 2 hours, it was picked up by 3 mid-tier financial sites. By morning, mainstream outlets had it. That speed doesn't happen by accident. Sebastian studied the board, his arms crossed. So someone seated it deliberately. Someone who knew exactly which dominoes to push. Sophia nodded. And someone with access to very specific numbers. The article cited internal expense ratios that aren't public. Sebastian's expression darkened. "Which means an insider." They fell into silence. The possibility was a gut punch, betrayal from within. The investigation drew them closer, almost against their will. Hours blurred into late nights as they pored over data, interviewing department heads. Tracing leaks. One night, Sophia caught Sebastian staring at the whiteboard too long, his eyes distant. "What is it?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just déjà vu. This reminds me of grad school. You with your markers. Me trying to keep up." The memory hit her unexpectedly late nights in university libraries. Cheap coffee, whispered jokes over textbooks. For a fleeting second, she allowed herself to remember how it felt to be his partner, not his adversary, but she pushed it away. That was a long time ago, she said briskly. Let's focus. Still, Sebastian smiled faintly, as if the memory meant more to him than he let on. By the end of the week, Sophia's team traced the leak to a single IP address. The trail wound back to a shell account used to post the first article. When they dug deeper, a name surfaced: an investigative journalist with a reputation for exposing corporate scandals. But when Sophia contacted him directly, his response was unexpected. I never wrote that piece, the journalist said, his voice sharp over the phone. Someone used my byline. The data in that article. I've never seen it. Sophia's pulse quickened. She put the call on speaker. Are you saying your name was forged? Sebastian demanded. Exactly, the journalist snapped. And whoever fed that story wanted it to look credible. Trust me, I'm furious. If I find who dragged my name into this, they'll regret it. The line went dead. Silence filled the room. Sophia met Sebastian's gaze. This wasn't just an insider leak. It was orchestrated. Someone staged it to look authentic. Sebastian's jaw tightened, which means they know us. They know how to weaponize perception. The breakthrough came late one evening when Sophia was reviewing metadata from the original article. She froze, zooming in on a digital signature embedded in one of the files. Sebastian, she whispered. Look at this. He leaned over her shoulder, the proximity sending a jolt through her. On the screen, a string of characters formed a cryptic code, but one that Sophia recognized from her marketing work. This watermark belongs to a PR firm, she explained, one that doesn't usually handle corporate crises. They're more political. And guess who's their top client? Sebastian frowned. Liam Cross. The name dropped between them like a stone into water. Sebastian's single quotes, his entire body went rigid. Memories collided. The rival developer who'd shadowed him for years. The man who seemed to appear whenever Sebastian secured a major contract. Liam had always played the role of a competitor, but this was war. Sophia's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed unease. If Liam's behind this, it won't stop here. He's testing you, probing for weaknesses. Sebastian clenched his fists. The betrayal cut deeper, knowing Liam had once been a friend, someone he'd trusted during his early career. No more shadows, he said quietly, almost to himself. If he wants a fight, he'll get one. Sophia studied him, torn between admiration and fear. He was resolute, unyielding, the Sebastian she once loved, but sharper now, harder from years at the top. And though she wanted to remain detached, she felt it, the pull of old loyalty, the instinct to stand beside him in battle. For the first time since their reunion, she whispered the truth, almost against her will. Then we fight together. The following week unfolded in a blur of relentless work. Meetings, calls, and late-night strategy sessions consumed their days. Yet beneath the grind, an undercurrent of tension hummed, both professional and personal. Sophia sat across from Sebastian in his private office one evening, her laptop open, files scattered. She glanced up, noticing the fatigue etched into his face. His tie was loosened, sleeves rolled, but his focus remained razor sharp. You don't have to push this hard, she murmured. He didn't look up. I do. If Liam thinks he can dismantle what I built, he's underestimated me. Sophia hesitated, then said softly, It's not just about the company, is it? His eyes finally met hers. For a long beat, silence stretched between them. Then he admitted, No. It's about proving I'm not the man who once walked away. I can fight. I will fight for what matters. Her chest tightened. She forced herself back to the screen. Then let's finish this. Their breakthrough came at midnight 2 days later. Sophia discovered an encrypted email chain hidden among routine correspondence in West Empire's servers. She decrypted it, revealing instructions sent to an anonymous employee details on how to leak expense reports, which reporters to contact, and precise timing. At the bottom of one message was a subtle digital stamp. Cross-development. Got you, Sebastian muttered. Leaning over her shoulder, Sophia scrolled through, adrenaline spiking. This is direct. It ties Liam to the leak and to paying off your insider. Sebastian's jaw hardened. Who's the insider? They traced the correspondence back to a mid-level financial officer, a man Sebastian had mentored years ago. The betrayal stung. Liam bought him, Sebastian said bitterly. Money talks. Loyalty doesn't. Sophia closed the file gently. At least now we know. We can expose him. He turned to her then, his gaze burning. Not we. You've already risked enough. This war is mine. But Sophia shook her head firmly. No, you brought me into this when you let me handle the fallout. You don't get to push me out now. For a moment, his mask cracked. His hand twitched, as if he wanted to reach for hers, then stilled. You're infuriating, he said quietly. And you're impossible, she shot back, though her lips trembled with something that wasn't anger. Days later, they confronted the insider. The man confessed under pressure, admitting Liam had promised him a lucrative position once West Empire collapsed. Sebastian dismissed him on the spot, rage simmering beneath his calm tone. Afterward, Sophia found Sebastian alone on the rooftop of the building, the city glittering below. You did the right thing, she said gently. He didn't turn. I should have seen it coming. I built walls around myself, but Liam slipped through anyway. Sophia stepped closer. That's what betrayal feels like. It blindsides you. But you can't blame yourself forever. He finally looked at her, his expression raw. I've made enough mistakes to last a lifetime. Losing you was the biggest one. The words struck her like a physical blow. For years, she'd imagined what he might say if they ever stood face to face again. But now that the moment was real, it scared her. You don't get to say that now, she whispered. Not when you left me behind. His eyes didn't waver. And I'll regret it until the day I die. But if this fight has taught me anything, it's that I can't keep running from the past or from you. The air between them pulsed with unsaid words. Sophia's heart pounded, torn between anger, longing, and fear. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Stepping back. We should focus on Liam, she said, her voice unsteady. But she couldn't shake the echo of his confession. The next morning, Sophia uncovered more evidence. Financial transfers from Liam's offshore accounts tied to the PR firm that spread the false reports. It was airtight proof. She placed the file in front of Sebastian. This ends him. Sebastian stared at the evidence, then at her. No, Sophia. This ends us running from the truth. After this, we face everything Liam, the board, and he trailed off, his gaze softening. Whatever this is between us. Sophia swallowed hard, her pulse racing. The battle with Liam was far from over, but another battle won inside her heart was already reaching its breaking point. The storm came quietly at first. It began with irregular activity on West Empire's server's tiny data transfers flagged by the IT department, but dismissed as glitches. By the third night, those glitches turned into megabytes of confidential files siphoned off into the void. Sophia was the first to spot the pattern. She was reviewing online chatter late one evening, monitoring any residual fallout from the tax scandal, when she noticed an odd spike in traffic linked to West Empire's cloud infrastructure. Her instincts screamed. She pulled deeper into the logs, her fingers flying across the keyboard, and then she saw it, a shadow account, operating under an employee ID that didn't exist, siphoning sensitive blueprints and project forecasts. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. She called Sebastian immediately. Within minutes, he stormed into the monitoring room, tie loosened, expression thunderous. "Show me?" Sophia pointed to the screen, her pulse racing. "They've been inside this system for at least a week. Whoever it is, they're after strategic designs, your next-gen infrastructure projects, international bids, proprietary algorithms. If these leak, it could cripple us," Sebastian finished grimly. Their eyes met, the weight of realization heavy between them. An emergency task force convened within the hour. Sebastian barked orders, his voice sharp with authority, while Sophia coordinated with IT security, mapping the intruder's digital trail. Every second mattered, but the deeper they dug, the clearer the picture became. The breach wasn't random, it was engineered with surgical precision, and when Sophia traced one of the shadow accounts to an external server, her heart sank. The digital watermark was the same as before. Cross-development. She looked at Sebastian, her voice low but steady. "It's Liam, again." Sebastian's jaw clenched, a vein pulsing in his temple. "First my reputation, now my company's future. He's escalating." Sophia nodded grimly. "And he's confident. Too confident? Which means he thinks he has someone on the inside helping him again." Hours bled into dawn. Sebastian refused to leave the command center. His entire empires of blood, sweat, and sacrifice was under siege, and he wouldn't surrender an inch. Sophia stayed beside him, their shoulders brushing occasionally as they pored over endless data streams. At one point, she caught him staring at her, exhaustion softening the steel in his eyes. "You didn't have to come this far with me," he murmured. "Yes, I did," she replied, not looking away. "Because if Liam destroys you, he doesn't just win against West Empire. He wins against us, against everything we've been fighting for." His throat worked, as if he wanted to say more, but instead, he returned his focus to the screen. Yet the silence between them was charged, heavy with words left unspoken. By mid-morning, they identified the mole, a senior engineer with access to sensitive project files. Liam had offered him a lucrative contract overseas in exchange for betraying West Empire. When confronted, the engineer crumbled under pressure, confessing to everything. But the damage was already severe. Gigabytes of data had been copied, waiting to be leaked. "We have less than 48 hours before Liam makes his move," Sophia calculated. "He'll time it to hit before your next shareholder meeting. Maximum damage." Sebastian slammed his fist against the table. "Then we take the fight to him first." Sophia inhaled sharply. "You mean expose him?" He nodded, eyes blazing. "With proof so airtight the world can't ignore it. But to do that, we'll need to infiltrate his channels, intercept the data before he can weaponize it." Sophia studied him carefully. "That's dangerous. If we fail, then I lose everything," he finished, his tone unyielding. "But I'm not afraid of losing anymore. Not when I already know what it feels like to lose you." Her breath caught. For a moment, she couldn't look away from him, from the raw honesty in his voice. Then she turned back to the screens, her resolve hardening. "Fine, then let's bring Liam down together." Sebastian's office became their war room. The blinds were drawn tight, phones silenced, laptops open with a web of digital maps stretching across the screens. Lines of code flickered like an underground battlefield, each command a bullet fired in silence. Sophia sat at the center of it, her fingers moving with calculated precision. She wasn't an engineer, but years of crisis management had taught her how to navigate digital trails, how to see the story hidden in data. And right now, every clue pointed toward Liam's hidden servers. Sebastian paced behind her, restless energy radiating off him. He hated waiting, hated watching someone else tear into his life's work. Yet he couldn't deny it. He trusted her more than anyone. Finally, Sophia leaned back, blowing a stray strand of hair from her face. There, his server farm, offshore, masked by 3 layers of proxies. "But see this." She pointed at a faint signature embedded in the transfer logs. It's sloppy. Someone on his team got careless. That's our way in. Sebastian bent closer, the warmth of his breath brushing her temple. Can you breach it? She smirked faintly, eyes still locked on the screen. Can we breach it? Yes. For the first time in days, a flicker of amusement tugged at his mouth. I liked the sound of that. The breach wasn't easy. They worked for hours, weaving through firewalls, dodging traps meant to expose intruders. More than once, alarms nearly triggered, forcing Sophia to improvise diversions. Every success drew them closer, not just digitally, but emotionally. Each time Sebastian's hand brushed hers as they typed in tandem, each time their shoulders pressed together in the narrow glow of the screens. The space between them seemed to shrink. At one point, Sebastian caught her gaze, lingering on him. For a heartbeat, the storm outside the corporate war. Liam's shadow faded. All she saw was the boy she once loved, older now, harder, but still burning with the same fire. You still look at me like that, he murmured. Sophia startled. Like what? Like you expect me to do the right thing, even after everything. Her throat tightened. Maybe I'm foolish. Or maybe, he said softly, you still know me better than anyone. The words hung heavy, unspoken feelings thick in the air. But before either could say more, the screen pinged. They were in. The server unfolded before them like a vault. Folders stacked with stolen files, blueprints, bids, algorithms, sensitive contracts. All of it poised to be weaponized against West Empire. But then, Sophia froze. Sebastian, look at this. She opened a folder buried beneath the rest. Inside were documents Liam had never intended anyone else to see: payment receipts, shell company ledgers, explicit instructions for his hired insiders. It was the smoking gun. Proof not only of corporate espionage, but of a deliberate conspiracy to dismantle West Empire. Sebastian's hands curled into fists. This is it. This buries him. Sophia copied the files onto an encrypted drive, her pulse hammering. We need to move fast. If he realizes we're inside, as if on cue, the screen flashed red. Unauthorized intrusion detected. Too late, Sebastian growled. He knows. Suddenly, the system began shutting down, files vanishing before their eyes. Liam's countermeasures were erasing the evidence in real time. Not if I can help it, Sophia muttered, typing furiously. Sweat beaded her forehead as she raced against the deletion protocols. Sebastian gripped her chair, steadying her. Tell me what to do. Hold the firewall open, she snapped. I can reroute the extraction, but I need 30 seconds. His fingers flew across the keyboard beside her, his business acumen translating into sheer determination. Side by side, they fought the invisible war, every keystroke a lifeline. 20 seconds, she hissed. Almost there, he gritted. The screen flickered. For a terrifying moment, the progress bar froze at 98%. Then, with a triumphant chime, the files locked into the encrypted drive. Sophia collapsed back in her chair, breathless. Got it? Sebastian exhaled hard, a laugh breaking from his chest. He pulled her into a sudden embrace, raw relief spilling out. You're incredible. For a moment, she didn't pull away. Her head rested against his chest, the steady rhythm of his heart grounding her. But then she caught herself, gently slipping free. Don't thank me yet, she said, though her voice trembled. Now we have to use this. As dawn broke, they stood on the rooftop of West Empire's tower, the city bathed in pale gold light. Sophia held the encrypted drive in her hand, the weight of it enormous. This can end Liam, she said quietly. Sebastian looked out at the skyline, jaw tight. No, we'll end him, together. Her eyes met his. For the first time, she didn't doubt his words. The boardroom felt like a theater, every polished surface reflecting the tension thick in the air. Rows of shareholders sat in hushed anticipation, papers shuffled nervously, Pens clicked without rhythm. At the far end of the table, Liam Cross leaned back in his chair, wearing the smug half-smile of a man who believed victory was already his. Sebastian stood at the podium, one hand resting on the polished wood, the other hidden in his pocket to steady the tremor in his fingers. He wasn't afraid of Liam Knott anymore. What shook him was the weight of what this moment meant. Years of rivalry, betrayal, and regret had led him here. And this time, he wasn't alone. His gaze flicked to Sophia, who stood by the projector, her shoulders squared, eyes fixed on the crowd. He drew strength from her presence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sebastian began, his voice deep, carrying across the cavernous room. "West Empire has endured many storms, but the one we face today isn't born of market forces or global uncertainty. It was manufactured." A ripple of murmurs coursed through the room. Liam arched an eyebrow, feigning curiosity. Sebastian gestured toward Sophia. "I've asked someone I trust implicitly to present the evidence." The spotlight shifted to her. Sophia inhaled slowly, forcing down the nerves that tightened her throat. Then she began. Slide by slide, she unfolded the narrative. Forged articles, shell companies, offshore accounts. The evidence was laid bare, each revelation punctuated by gasps or murmurs. "This," she said, highlighting the final document, "is a direct transfer from cross-development to the account of a West Empire employee. Payment for stolen data. Payment for sabotage." The room erupted. Shareholders leaned forward, voices rising in outrage. Security personnel stiffened near the doors. Only Liam remained still, his smile twitching at the edges. Slowly, he rose, buttoning his jacket with deliberate calm. "Impressive performance," he said smoothly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "But transparent. Fabrications designed by a desperate man who knows his empire is crumbling." Sophia's pulse quickened. She looked at Sebastian, but he didn't flinch. He stepped down from the podium, every stride deliberate, until he stood just a few feet from Liam. Their eyes locked like combatants in an arena. "You always underestimated me," Sebastian said quietly, though his words carried. "You thought ambition made me blind, that success made me careless. But you forgot something vital." Liam tilted his head, mocking. "And what's that?" "That I'm not alone." Sebastian's voice sharpened, his gaze sliding toward Sophia. "Not anymore." The simple declaration seemed to echo in the room. For Sophia, it landed like a blow to the chest. She had never expected him to say it here, in front of everyone, where it mattered most. Her throat tightened, but she held her ground. Liam scoffed. "This is a circus. No court would uphold such flimsy accusations." Sophia stepped forward before Sebastian could respond. Her voice was clear, steady. "You're wrong. Every document has been verified, every transfer traced, and every attempt to cover your tracks has been undone. This isn't a show, Mr. Cross. It's the truth." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, one of the senior board members stood, her voice trembling with controlled fury. "I've seen enough, Mr. Cross. You'll leave this room immediately." "Security." The guards moved in. Liam's composure cracked for the first time. His jaw tightened, eyes flashing with venom as they locked on Sebastian. "This isn't over," he hissed as they escorted him out. "You may have won today, but you'll regret crossing me." Sebastian didn't respond. He didn't need to. The evidence had spoken louder than any retort. When the room emptied, only Sebastian and Sophia remained. The adrenaline drained from her limbs, leaving her weak-kneed. She sank into a chair, pressing a hand to her forehead. Sebastian moved to her side, crouching so their eyes met. For once, he didn't wear the mask of the untouchable CEO. His expression was raw, stripped down to the man she had once known. "You saved me," he said softly. She shook her head. "No, you saved yourself. I just helped you hold up the mirror." But he didn't look convinced. His gaze lingered on her, searching, as if afraid she might vanish if he blinked. "I meant what I said," he whispered. "I'm not alone anymore. Not if you'll let me stand beside you again." Her heart thudded painfully. For so long, she'd dreamed of hearing those words. But dreams were safe. Reality was sharp, jagged. "You hurt me, Sebastian," she said, her voice breaking. "When you chose ambition over us, it nearly destroyed me. I can't forget that." "I don't want you to forget," he replied, his voice fierce. "I want you to remember, so I can prove every day that I'm not that man anymore." Her eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away. She didn't want him to see her break. Yet, when his hand hovered near hers, trembling, she didn't pull away this time. Slowly, she let her fingers slide into his. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something fragile, tentative, a beginning, for the first time in years. Sebastian allowed himself to breathe. Outside, the city pulsed with light and noise, indifferent to the drama that had just unfolded. But inside that quiet boardroom, two people stood on the edge of something far greater than victory. Not closure, not certainty, but a chance. And for Sebastian West and Sophia Davis, that was more than enough. The weeks that followed were quieter, though not without ripples. Liam Cross's empire unraveled swiftly once the evidence hit the press. Investigations mounted, allies distanced themselves, and the man who once wielded power like a blade found himself silenced, his threats reduced to whispers behind prison walls. For West Empire, recovery was a slow but steady climb. Shareholders, reassured by transparency, returned with guarded optimism. Contracts stabilized, clients renewed their trust. The storm had passed, but scars remained visible, reminders of how close everything had come to ruin. Sebastian felt them most at night. Alone in his penthouse, he'd stand by the windows overlooking the city, its lights sprawling endlessly, and wonder how much of it mattered without someone to share it with. It was Sophia who anchored him. She didn't vanish after the battle. She stood at first professionally, guiding West Empire's image back to stability, but gradually, her presence took root in ways neither of them could deny. One evening, weeks after Liam's downfall, Sebastian found her in the company's rooftop garden, standing by the railing as the sun sank into the horizon. The city below glowed amber, softened by twilight. "You always find the quiet spots," he said gently. Approaching, she turned, her expression calm but guarded. "And you always find me in them." A faint smile touched his lips. "I try." They stood side by side, silence stretching between them, comfortable and tense all at once. Finally, Sebastian spoke. "I keep thinking about everything we went through, about what I said in that room." Sophia's fingers tightened on the railing. "That you're not alone anymore." "Yes," he admitted. His voice was low, but steady. "And that I don't want to be, not without you." Her eyes searched his, full of conflict. "You make it sound simple, but it's not. We can't just erase the past." "I don't want to erase it," he said quickly. "I want to face it. I want to carry it with us, so we never repeat it." Sophia turned back toward the horizon. "You left me once. I built a life without you. Stronger, maybe colder, but mine. If I let you in again, and you walk away, I won't." The words came out before he could stop them. Fierce, certain. She looked at him then, truly looked. The Sebastian, she remembered, the ambitious boy with fire in his eyes, was still there. But time had carved something new into him. Humility, regret, resolve. "You can't promise that," she whispered. "No," he admitted softly, "but I can spend every day proving I won't." The air thickened with unspoken truths. Neither moved, neither spoke for a long moment. Then, quietly, Sophia reached for his hand. Her touch was tentative, fleeting, as if testing whether the ground beneath them would hold. Sebastian closed his fingers around hers, not gripping too tightly, not pushing for more, just steady, just present. Later that night, they walked together through the city streets, away from glass towers and boardrooms, blending into the ordinary rhythm of life. Neon signs flickered overhead, laughter spilled from cafes. Couples brushed past with the ease of familiarity. For once, Sebastian didn't feel like the billionaire CEO or the man carrying an empire on his back. He felt like someone relearning how to be human. Sophia glanced at him as they walked, her lips curving faintly. "You look different out here." "How so?" "Less unreachable." He chuckled softly. "Maybe that's because I'm not reaching anymore. Not for the top, not for the next deal. Just for this." He lifted their joined hands slightly. She didn't answer. But she didn't let go. At the end of the street, they paused before a small bookstore, its window glowing warm with lamplight. Inside, people browsed shelves, oblivious to the world's chaos. Sophia tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Strange, isn't it? After everything, the battles, the lies, the boardroom wars, it all comes down to something as simple as choosing whether to take another step forward. Sebastian met her gaze, his voice quiet but certain. "Then let's take it one step at a time." For a moment, she just looked at him, her defenses wavering under the weight of his sincerity. Then she nodded, almost imperceptibly. They turned toward the street again, their hands still linked. The city stretched ahead, vast and uncertain, full of shadows and light. Neither knew what tomorrow would bring, but as they walked into the night, side by side, they carried something stronger than certainty-hope, and for Sebastian West and Sophia Davis, hope was enough to begin again. Sebastian West stood in the dim corner of the rooftop terrace, the city lights of New York glittering behind him like scattered diamonds. He had been in boardrooms where billions were decided with a flick of his signature. He had stood on podiums where cameras flashed and reporters fired questions like bullets. Yet nothing had ever terrified him more than the woman standing in front of him now. "Sophia," he said, his voice rough, almost breaking. "I know I don't deserve it, but I want a second chance. I want us again. You and me." Sophia Davis didn't flinch. She didn't soften at the tremor in his words, nor at the way his hand hovered, uncertain, as if begging for hers. Her dark eyes were steady, like still water, hiding all its depths. She let the silence stretch until it pressed on his chest like a weight. When she finally spoke, her voice was clear, decisive. "No, Sebastian. That chapter ended years ago. Whatever you're looking for, it's not here anymore." The rejection was sharp, slicing clean through the thin thread of hope he had carried with him tonight. Sebastian exhaled, the cold air biting into his lungs. He wanted to argue, to plead, to remind her of all they once had, the late nights in the campus library, the dreams whispered between them, the promises they thought unbreakable. But the steel in her tone told him those memories weren't a bridge back to her. They were ruins she refused to walk through again. Sophia adjusted the strap of her clutch on her shoulder, her professional posture unyielding. She was dressed elegantly, her navy dress tailored perfectly, her heels clicking softly on the marble as she turned away. She didn't look back. Sebastian stood frozen, watching her walk back into the golden light of the gala, where laughter and champagne drowned out the storm raging in his chest. She had changed, or maybe he had. The Sophia he remembered had been warm sunlight, laughing freely, sketching out ideas for campaigns and projects with messy notes, challenging his relentless ambition with her own bold vision. Tonight, though, she was all polish and control. A woman who carried herself with the confidence of someone who had built her own world without him. And why wouldn't she? Sebastian West had left her behind. The gala glittered around him. The West Empire's newest project, a sprawling skyscraper meant to redefine the Manhattan skyline, was the excuse for this lavish evening. Investors, partners, and city officials mingled, glasses clinking. But Sebastian barely saw them. His empire was intact, stronger than ever. At 36, he had built himself into a titan in the world of construction and real estate. Yet, as he stood among chandeliers and champagne, all he could feel was the cold emptiness inside, hollowness no success had ever filled. And then she had walked in tonight, the woman he had once loved enough to see forever in her eyes. The woman he had chosen to let go, Sophia Davis. She was no longer the girl chasing deadlines in the campus newsroom, scribbling ideas on the backs of napkins. Now, she was the sharp, polished director of marketing at Horizon Media, one of the city's rising firms. Her presence was magnetic, her smile poised for boardrooms and negotiations. She was the kind of woman who could walk into any room and command attention without needing anyone else's power to validate her. And he had lost her. From across the ballroom, another man watched Sophia. Liam Turner. To most, Liam was nothing more than Sophia's loyal colleague, a strategist at Horizon Media who often stood at her side during events. His easy charm and quick wit made him popular among clients. He was the kind of man who seemed safe, dependable, but as Sebastian's gaze drifted, he caught something sharp in Liam's eyes, something more than camaraderie. It was hunger, not just for Sophia, but for power. Sebastian recognized it instantly. He had lived his entire life surrounded by men like that, men who cloaked ambition in easy smiles, who knew when to shake hands and when to twist knives in the dark. Liam raised his glass toward Sophia, his lips curved in a smile too practiced, too smooth. Sophia returned the gesture, unaware, perhaps unwilling to see the calculation behind it. Sebastian's jaw tightened. He had been blind once before, too consumed by ambition to hold on to what mattered. He wouldn't let blindness cost him again. Yet Sophia's rejection still echoed in his head. No, Sebastian. That chapter ended years ago. The words replayed, cruel in their finality. Maybe she was right. Maybe he had forfeited any claim to her the moment he chose blueprints and contracts over love. Still, Sebastian couldn't shake the truth clawing inside him. Every skyscraper he had built, every empire he had expanded, every boardroom victory, none of it meant anything without her. The world might see him as invincible. But tonight, under the shimmer of chandeliers and the shadow of her refusal, Sebastian West felt like a man stripped bare, and for the first time in years. He didn't know if he had the strength to rebuild, but he knew one thing with brutal clarity. He wasn't ready to let Sophia Davis walk out of his life again. Not as a stranger. Not this time.